the original sin of our country was not slavery, in my opinion. Slavery and the subjugation and the genocide against Native peoples, those were not the original sin. They were symptoms of the original sin. The original sin was the business model: slavery, drugs, piracy. That was the original sin. We need to fix the business model. And that doesn't mean get rid of capitalism. Capitalism was perverted by this crappy business model that was the outgrowth or the experiment in consciousness of men who were evil. It's an evil business model. And let's start to call out some of the foundational people in this. We have a picture here of Rene Descartes. I don't think people think of Rene Descartes as evil. And I'm not going to make the comment that Rene Descartes was evil. But we certainly went wrong with Rene Descartes, in my opinion. Rene Descartes was a very famous philosopher. He was, if you've heard this before, he was the person that came up with, I think, therefore I am. But what Descartes left the world was something called Cartesian dualism. And this is, see, we are even if we don't study history, if we don't study philosophy, there's an old biblical quote, there's nothing new under the sun. I am everything that I think and feel. Well, not everything. I'd like to think I come up with some novel, creative ideas, but they're based upon the intellectual framework that has been developed over thousands and thousands of years of human history. And this guy, Descartes, who is famous, came up with this Cartesian dualism, which is there's mind and body, and they're really separate. In other words, there is a spiritual mind. I think, therefore I am, which is related to the spiritual world, and the body is kind of like an automaton. It goes by itself. It's kind of a machine. And this idea was uptaken so heavily in that European intellectual tradition that over hundreds of years, people gapped their mind from their body. And when I say they gapped, the connection between mind and body was weakened. And we live in a world today where people are really in their heads. I mean, you may be watching this on your digital device with headphones on, laying down, not feeling your body at all. You're completely, and I do it too, so I don't like to use the word you. I do it. I lay there and I'm, completely in this digitized, spiritualized, or intellectualized environment where body is not really part of the picture. Think about this juxtaposed with those colonists who are out there every day hunting game to eat, farming to eat, building their own homes. Freedom. Let's think about freedom. If every technique that you need to live is something that you've mastered yourself, you're free of needing anybody's expertise. You know the full range. You know how to build a house. You know how to set a bone. You know how to grow the crops. You know how to hunt. You know how to fish. You are self-governing. That is self-governance. And then, of course, they made a political self-governance that went right along with it. So that experiment in human consciousness, that self-governance, we the people walked away from that because life was difficult. Is our life easier today? That's a question. Is life really easier today? Or have we traded one set of problems for another set of problems? These are the kind of questions we have to work through. I have to work through it on my own. I think I would enjoy the farming life. I don't know it as well. I think that every person should own land and I am considering, and I do, we grow uh, vegetables at the house, and we try to uh, uh, do as much outside as we can. But we're not very effective at it in my family, and I want to improve that because I want to self-govern. If every family in the country just planted some vegetables in their backyard, that'd be a big deal. For two reasons. One, we need the food because of the inflation. But number two, it would bind us to the land and it would bring us into contact with nature, which is the fundamental building block. We'll be moving our bodies in nature. That's the fundamental building block of well being. And so this Descartes got this Cartesian dualism going with the body as an automaton and the mind, I think, therefore I am. And our world has gotten so overbalanced to the intellectual, which the scientific method and the scientific output is uh, the fruit of that Cartesian dualism. And we know that there's something wrong because we watch these sporting events where these athletes come and they're phenomenal in their athletic prowess. And we pay these people sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars or even billions of dollars to remind us, or they encapsulate for us, we project onto them our desire to be physically capable. And this is, to me, tragic because all of us need to be physically capable and all of us need to be in nature. And I stopped watching professional sports 25, 30 years ago because I'd rather be a sportsman than watch a sportsman. Let me say this again. I would rather be a sportsman than watch a sportsman. I think if we all started to do this, if we all decided to be rather than to watch, our problems as a society would start to be alleviated because this is part of self-governance. Self-governance includes well-being. Big theme. I want everyone in the political to understand that preamble demands the general welfare is the whole point of the whole deal. So when our politicians start talking about war in the Ukraine, what has that got to do with my well-being? What does that got to do with my children's well-being? What has that got to do with your well-being? War in the Ukraine. What is that? When my government talks about $32 trillion of national debt, what does that got to do with my well-being? That makes me a slave, a debt slave. I'm not sure the exact number, but I think every man, woman, and child in this country owes a couple $100,000 against that $32 trillion in debt. And they're going to collect it from us. So, how does that make me well? What, Mr. Politician, are you going to tell me that reduces that debt so that I'm not a debt slave? Remember that business model? Slavery, drugs, piracy. Oh, Mr. Politician, you want to talk to me about inflation? Is that not piracy? Are you not taking away my net worth, my purchasing power by inflating the currency? And am I supposed to believe it's an accident? Because I want all of my listeners and viewers to know inflation is not an accident. It's government policy. So these PhDs that run our administration, our state, our administrative state, they have decided that they need to inflate the currency. Why? Because there is a shortfall between what we spend and what we take in. Our outgo exceeds our income. And we've been doing it for years and years and years, since 2000 at least. We're up to 32 trillion, and I said this in the last podcast. 32 trillion is at least 120% of the gross domestic product of the United States. The total output of the country is less than our debt. And in the history of the world, a sovereign debt that exceeds national output has never been repaid. I personally place a very high value on truth dependability, transparency. If I make a deal to pay you, or I say I'm going to give you some money, I'm going to give it to you, or I'm going to die trying. We've lost that spirit. If we don't pay that debt back, because it's my debt, we the people, I'm going to be crushed by the not paying it back. We need as a people to stop and realize that's our debt given to us by our elected representatives who obviously were not concerned about our well-being because they've made us into debt slaves. So let's think about this. Let's get motivated and activated and realize that that debt is a real thing. And when it comes crashing in upon us, it will be like a tsunami wave of economic pain. So when we work on our well-being, it's a very broad, almost infinite topic to consider, and we're all considering it. You know, every one of us every day is pursuing well-being in our own way, in our own time. But if we're not taught the occult, and occult just means hidden, doesn't necessarily mean negative, the essentials of well-being have been hidden from the people forever. I mean, there's a great power that a hierarchy can master by making people move up in the hierarchy to learn how to be well. And that's pretty much how all the secret societies function. And now we have the internet and we have each other, and we can make known to everyone what being well is about. And that's what we need to work on as the American people, well-being. And this Cartesian dualism is really, it's created great unwellness because it's made us believe, or people have used Cartesian dualism to advance the idea that our minds have no impact on our bodies, that our bodies are machines, and that we turn those machines over to technocrats called doctors who treat these bodies as machines with drugs and chemicals to bring about better results if there's some failure in that machine. In your mind, how you think, your spiritual life, which doesn't exist to these Darwinists, that's why they never admit it as part of the equation. What you eat, how you move, how your emotions are, that's not part of the picture. That's not part of our current healthcare model. Our current healthcare model is you go to the doctor, they assess your vitals and your blood work, and they prescribe medicaments to address deficiencies or anomalies in the result. I mean, you're only in there for 7 or 8 minutes. It's a professional episode. You know, doctors used to have a bedside manner. Doctors aren't in control of doctorate anymore. Insurance companies are, and the government is, because we have state-mandated health care for all. And that is not well-being care. That is a giant delivery system for drugs and techniques. Those of us who have been sick know that sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. If it doesn't, they say, oh, too bad. We're going to manage your disease. You know what? I don't want to be managed or ruled over. I personally want to have faith, and I want to move, and I want to be in nature, and I want to eat right, and I want to sleep right, and I want to address the truths in my life. And then I wait patiently. That word patient, there's a word. Go to the hospital, you're a patient. Go to the doctor, you're a patient. Just be patient, and nature is going to heal you. What happened to that idea? Well, there's no money in it, and it went away.